So I'm going to tell you what is my position now with my PhD. After 2 years of PhD, I was dealing a lot about what I see visionary poetry. I don't mean poetry as written, but I mean the vision that poets perceived and how he received images and vision and translate that into words. Now what I want to do is to convey that more in the visual art. I'm based in School of Art and Design. Less poetry theory and more art practice theory. So, what do you think?
The poetic wisdom that flows in your art is the foundation for this research. You cannot deny that there's a poetic involvement in terms of the message, the verbal message that always linked with your images. Even when you do your visual art, it's always based on your verbal impressions of what you call poetic inspiration. When an artist does an art per art, it doesn't come to them in a visual way as it does to you. So from that perspective, linking it with poetry and visionary poetry is correct. However, you are an artist, and that's why you need to link it with art, because what you do is not poetry as such, poetry as in academic verse, but it is a literary form. It is a new type of artistic poetry that you have created, that you have predecessors, such as Blake, who was working on visuals from verbal experience.
Mm-hmm.
You need to emphasize the artistic aspect, but you also need to point out your verbal impressions that lead you to create the visions. It has to be a very balanced state.
And I think that now I need to more balance it towards the visual art theory study.
Because you have not done that.
That's right. And that is my so-called issue, because I don't know how can you convey through image study, through visual art study, what I call the verbal inspiration. Because I've been reading Russian construction, Vasily Kandinsky, Piet Mondrian, Kirchner. I'm reading some more symbolism, pre-Raphaelites, and they're all very spiritual, but what they say, they talk about the spirit. And then they make art.
That is why your work is unique and is linked more to poetry. Because the artists then that discuss the spirituality discuss the final outcome.
Yes.
Where the spirituality, the inspirational imagery is related to the outcome.
Yes.
You explore in the process, the creative process that causes you to create the vision as a result of your verbal inspiration.
That's right.
So it comes as a poem that becomes an art, a vision, a visual poetry. And you concentrate on the process.
That's right, but let me say again, those artists, those visual artists that I've mentioned earlier, they talk about inspiration and then they don't show the process but just create art, which makes me to come to believe that it is impossible to convey that process.
Not impossible, but rather use it on the contrary. What you can do is, your innovation is the attention focused on the process. And use what they say about the product to back up your knowledge about the process.
But the process cannot be shown. You cannot show the inspiration, what it is and how it translates into image and words in a PhD. I don't know how to do it.
When you say you cannot, then you create your own reality.
So I'm saying I don't know how to do it.
That's a different question.
Yes.
You can link two of them because the eventual outcome and your discussion comes out in visions and images, films and stills.
Yes.
You can expand the analysis of spirituality in a product as influenced by these people you read of. And yet you need to expand it and focus the attention on the process as you experience from your practice, because it is a practice-based research.
Yes.
And show your work as a case study, along with case studies of other artists that you will ask questions, perhaps, and explore how they sense the same experience through their work.
Yeah, I'm going to work with this with my supervisor.
And link a little bit, perhaps,
yes,
with theory on the poetry that might help you to establish your process stronger.
Yeah, I'm going to work with that with my new supervisor. But my fear at the moment, although I'm going to work with my supervision about this, is that the end result will be exactly like Kirchner, talking about the spirit and then making art, and there's no connection.
The innovation will be in the connection to the process, which you have to establish in your own way,
I don't know
based on practice.
Okay, I have another year to work on that. So the first idea is to do a so-called field study through the internet, where I put poetry and create quick questionnaire for people to click, and then I generate messages, I generate data. And I'm going to make even tables and diagrams of how people relate to that. Thumbs up, very good. But what exactly should be tested, do you suggest, in such field study, and making sure that it's going to be visual? Because at the moment I'm thinking of poetry test. Again, it's not visual experiment, is it?
Your work has to concentrate on 3 aspects. The question on the process should involve the eventual outcome, as you used to ask about people watching at your films, and ask about what do they understand from the image, and they would come back to spiritual processes involved. Go back to your quantum words image. You need to ask about the product, the process, and the poetic wisdom involved. The questions have to concentrate around these aspects. Then you can deduce from that about the process that will back up your argument.
Yes, but the test, the field study, which I'm going to do is through poetry. I'm going to show people poetry.
Through visual poetry. Are you going to give just the text or the image?
I thought just the text. What do you think? I don't have time to start designing the text. I thought just the poem, and let's ask people questions about the poetry that they read. I'll ask my teacher, but I want to see what you think as well.
Most of your practice is images with poetry.
That's right.
So it is images with poetry that you need to ask people about.
Wow, that would be very difficult to create, to physically
Not
study.
Not necessarily. You already have films and films, minutes of poems.
That's right.
With imagery.
I have images and poetry, yes.
You can use these for your questionnaires.
Days?
You already have established your practice. Now you need to research into that and analyze it.
Okay, how can I do an analysis of film? Because I need to make a questionnaire.
You can create a set of criteria with which you will analyze the outcome of the process, which is what people see and understand from the images.
Yes.
And the words.
Yes.
And the process, whether you've managed to communicate part of the process through your verbal and visual imagery to people. And perhaps 1 or 2 questions in general that will lead to inspiration.
And this has to be in visual art practice research, through theory and practice of art, not poetry.
You cannot just do verbal poetry as such, because your research is not about just verbal poetry.
That's right.
You do not do it in literature work or poetry analysis or medieval poetry. You do it in art, and you create films and imagery. So it's a bit takes you astray. You already have used your poetry in imagery, and you always see it in image. So you need to ask questions